What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Before the Whistle. I'm your host, Maddy Hudak, and I am oddly a little cold today. I haven't been outside yet because Tulane has night practice tonight. This episode normally being filmed on Monday. It is Tuesday today because I wanted to have a chance to go through Tulane's media day yesterday and the players that I spoke with and kind of break down some of the insight that I gained from yesterday. All of that to be said, I think the fact that I haven't baked outside in the sun today, my body doesn't know what to do. All of that to be said, I am wearing one of my juicy jackets from 6th grade. So all of that aside, I am here to mostly break down Tulane today. I did have a chance to watch the Saints preseason game. I unfortunately wasn't able to attend the Superdome, but I could hear the crowd noise on TV, and that was really something to see. And I'm probably going to break that down on Friday's show this week just because, nothing necessarily is happening between now and then. And I do want to have a chance to look a little more at the preseason game film, just a lot of the question marks that I have. You can't see the routes, you can't see the safeties, and a lot of that kind of coverage stuff on the broadcast view. And so without kind of having the time to do that yet, going to hold off on that for a little while, but plenty to talk about with Tulane lately. I did preview training camp on my last episode that, my solo episodes on Tuesdays, and we did have a chance to scrimmage on Saturday. I can't say that I gained the greatest insight from that, but just to be honest, I've said this, I don't think that I really gained that much from many Tulane scrimmages in any of the now 3 seasons that I've spent in training camp, including the spring game. So I just think that it gets to a point where you need to be able to see yourself against, real competition, real opponents that you're not used to going up one-on-one against all the time in camp, and just have that kind of full pad sense of determination. So I will kind of break down what I did glean from, my limited insights in that game, including the conditions of the field, which I have brought up before, but it's worth noting in the setting that the scrimmage took place at. And just again, to harp on the situational football that Tulane really emphasizes, the reason we are having night practice tonight, Willie Fritz brought this up, is because the South Alabama opener is at 7 p.m. and the stadium lights are a little different to look up into when you're looking for a pass or looking for, a punt or a kickoff return. Given their emphasis on special teams, I really just, again, appreciate the attention to detail that's being put there. So all of that breaking down on today's show. Let's start with that scrimmage. I did kind of build that up a little bit on my last episode, just given kind of a lot of the position battles going on at Tulane, mainly to me, safety and running back. And those are kind of the biggest question marks. I know linebacker has a void, and that's something that I'm going to kind of touch on with some insight again that I got from Tulane's media day and talking with guys like Tyler Grubbs, one of the new transfer linebackers. But I've always just kind of felt like you can only see so much in practice, and especially in defense. I think you can see a little bit from the coverage, but you can't really see the tackling until you really put those pads on, and you can't really see that much from the group of running backs until you really get into those situations. All of that to be said, I think that the defense was really getting just consistent penetration through the line after the first couple of series, and the running backs didn't really get anywhere on Saturday. The person that stood out to me the most, if I had to pick one, was Shedra Lewis. He just happened to kind of break through a few tackles. He was in with the second team, but just his quickness really sticks out to me. I keep thinking about, again, how Willie Fritz has mentioned his kickoff returns for touchdowns, and the fact that I've seen him with that kind of straight line speed go pretty far down the field and keep that acceleration really running at full speed all the way down there. And so to see that speed in the scrimmage was something that really stood out to me. It was hot. Let's not downplay that at all. And that was kind of, I believe the scrimmage started between 8:30 and 9, but we went until 11:30. And yes, the Ole Miss kickoff is at 2:30, and so that sun is going to kind of switch. But I will just again point to the turf, and that you can just tell that there is such a difference out there. I remember coming home from the Oklahoma scrimmages after that first season. We had ran 3 back-to-back on Saturdays at noon, just trying to get used to what was going to be that noon kickoff time. And I just remember coming home and being absolutely spent. It was just so blisteringly hot out there. And this time, I actually went out and was able to do something that evening and not feel like I was just completely left in a puddle of sweat on the floor. And I say that as Louisiana has officially declared a state of emergency because of the heat. And this is unhealthy, and it's just none of us should be out there. And Tulane has taken a lot of their practices to the Superdome accordingly. But the fact of the matter is, we have to get ready to play at these times. And so It's hard not to say that that wasn't kind of affecting things, but I felt the same kind of way in the Saints preseason game. Again, I'll get to that in my episode, where I don't think you got that much out of the running backs, except me being really impressed by Jamal Williams and pass protection. At least in that situation, you have the Kansas City Chiefs, who do play their starters in that first series, and a credible pass rush. And so you were really able to kind of see those impressive things in a way that you're just not going to see in a scrimmage setting, where you're ultimately, not trying to make the team at the expense of, I'm not saying anyone's ever trying to injure anyone on purpose, but we see that happen all the time in preseason when guys are just playing a little too hard, trying to make that roster. No one's doing that in a scrimmage setting. And so just to all keep that in mind. And just, I have to look at this just so I make sure I get it right. But Shawty Clayton-Johnson got the first team reps at running back, and I do expect him to open the season with South Alabama. And I know that's a giant question mark of who's going to replace Tajay Spears. And I don't want people to necessarily think the fact that they're having this competition with 5 or 6 guys mean that they don't have anyone. Because that is, it's one or the other. Either you have a good room, or you have, 16 sous chefs and no head chef. That was such a bizarre random reference, but it's interesting to me. I've just kind of been thinking about this, how I've had the opportunity now to cover a quarterback competition in the NFL when Drew Brees retired. And yes, it was not the most exciting quarterback competition I've ever experienced between Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston, but just getting that experience, it showed me the value in waiting and not just giving away a job because you want to just solve problems and, not hurt any feelings. Because a lot of people thought that, Jameis Winston should have been handed that role. And that competition, the fact that it took until the second preseason game to declare a winner, to me, there's no winner at all if you get that far. But it just goes to show, do your due diligence in that matter. It's absolutely not the time to just make a snap decision. And ultimately it didn't end up working out, but it's also not like the Saints just threw putty at a wall and saw what stuck. You can see really the deliberateness of them going out and getting Derek Carr, his familiarity with Dennis Allen, his familiarity with the West Coast system that really worked under Drew Brees and Pete Carmichael. All that to say, thought going into a position battle to me is so much better than just naming a starter again just to get it out of the way. So I just kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit, where, we might see it take 2 or 3 weeks in order for a guy to separate and for the team to really feel confident, shaping that depth chart out. And ultimately injuries do happen. And so getting those guys out there with real snaps against, legitimate opponents, that's not the worst thing in the world either. Especially when you consider that Tajay did take a majority of the reps towards the end of the last season. And a lot of the time it was Cam Carroll back there with him before he got injured last year as well. And so the more reps that any of them can get, and the fact that the biggest thing to me is the consistency with the returnees on the offensive line. And just talking with Sincere Haynesworth yesterday at Media Day, I'm going to get to a little more of those comments, but it really stuck out to me, just the caliber of person that Tulane really focuses on recruiting, just the way that he's so well-spoken and is just so able to talk about these things and how he wants to be a leader, not only for his position group, but for the entire team, feeling that void. I asked him about him and Michael Pratt being the 2 remaining captains. And, he only spoke for himself, not wanting to speak for Michael Pratt, who we all know is just a massive leader himself. But he said that's something he really wants to grow this year, and that tight ends could come to him and ask about something and him have that knowledge. That's just something you really want to hear out of your center. And the fact that him and Michael Pratt have been together from day one. That was something I asked him as well. And he recalled that game where Michael Pratt came in halfway through the game against Southern Miss. And he said before they all got sent home for COVID that him and Michael Pratt had really, bonded and kind of knew that they were going to do this thing together. And it's just hard to ignore the fact that both of them came back in tandem. And I wouldn't blame Pratt necessarily for moving on if his center wasn't coming back, just because of how critical that relationship is to the entirety of the offense in general. So all of the running back position aside, the fact that you have a returning center and quarterback who have spent now 3 or 4 seasons together and playing significant time together, that to me just can't be understated. And the shape that they're all in, just the one-on-one battles that I've been able to see in practice, the tackling, the one-on-ones between the offensive line and the defensive line have gotten really sometimes aggressive, but I love to see that in practice. These guys, they can't take their foot off the gas pedal, but you can just see the strength. I was watching one of the offensive line blocking drills they were doing in the Superdome the other day, where they were working on their footwork and really jumping back with both their feet in order to remain into a block. That takes a lot of strength in your upper body to be able to handle your use of hands while not actually being able to step backwards. So just to see that, because he had brought up kind of his 3 reasons for returning, one of them being, just that he wants to grow and become a leader, and he just felt like it wasn't done yet. One of them being the fact that he is a fellow School of Science Engineering graduate with a psychology degree, just like myself. And he's correct that without a master's, you can't do much with an undergraduate in psych. So that was something he had conversations with his mom. The third thing that he brought up was Kurt Hester. And I just tweeted about this because Football Scoop named him the strength and conditioning coach of the year. I don't know any other strength and conditioning coaches, but to me, it's literally not even a question. I have never heard the name brought up more in my entire life in any situation across the board than I have with Tulane players, Tulane staff members, Tulane media about Kurt Hester. And it's for a reason. I urge you all to go back and watch one of my earlier episodes that I had with Kurt Hester this offseason, just how deliberate and thoughtful he is. And the fact that he started out, building his own set with planks and plywood in his backyard and has developed into the person that he is today. But, that was one of the primary reasons for a really incredible college center coming back just can't be understated. And just the difference that he's seen in his training. The fact that it has been the hottest August on record, I was not exaggerating in that last episode where I talked about that. And we haven't seen that many cramping. We haven't seen that many soft tissue, if any injuries. It's astronomical how much of a difference he's made. And then you think about the fact that 4 of these guys on the offensive line played a long time together last year. Kanan Ray was playing the first half of the season. He tore his ACL in the USF game. He's now an assistant coach alongside Dan Rochar, a graduate assistant. I'm not entirely sure, but the fact again that he chose basically to retire from football to learn under the tutelage of Rochar and come back. So just to have that experience. But then you have Josh Remitich who came in, and I remember him jumping on. I actually went and rewatched the last 4 minutes of the Cotton Bowl yesterday because I'm insane, but someone had tweeted, remember when Tulane won the Cotton Bowl? And, there was a play in that final drive where Michael Pratt was sacked. He was down, but the ball did fly out, and you saw Josh Remitich just jump on that ball like there was no tomorrow so quickly. And I remembered that in the game, and that was something they really worked on last year. But you have him, I'm just looking for this. You have Prince Pine, Sincere Haynesworth, Josh Remitich, and Rashad Green. That's really solid. And then you have Cameron Wire coming in from LSU at that left tackle role. And just the growth that I've seen from spring camp from him, the comments that, initially getting kind of used to this system, he's really, getting some legitimate competition time down now. And so to have 4 of your 5 guys come back, and then to have someone from a Power 5 SEC program transfer over and have the coach be Dan Rochar, that's what makes me feel the best about this running back situation is the offensive line. So I'm still curious about Arnold Barnes. I think Iverson Celestine has always not let you forget about him. And I urge you all again to go back to that Kansas State game. He really stepped up in that game when Taja was having a slower start to the season. In the same way, I didn't glean that much on the defensive side of the ball because really I just thought the defensive line was getting after it. The first team defensive line was Devin Deal, Patrick Jenkins, Eric Hicks, and Keith Cooper. And let me just say, Devin Deal is one of my favorite players. He was my player of the game several times last year. He wasn't a starter. Every time he came in, he made it count. He had like multiple pass deflections. I want to say he may have blocked a field goal. He did something on special teams, I believe. It's just, he always came in and made an impact when it counted. And just reading about his background, his dad played, his mom played volleyball, and I believe she's now a volleyball coach. And just talking about his knowledge of the game and the playing time that all these guys have gotten on that defensive line and playing together at that. And then you have Adonis Frulu coming back, who, again, when he had 30 pounds on his nearest backup, and hearing these comments from these guys about all of the different fronts that Shield Wood has brought in, the fact that they do have a true zero tech in Adonis Frelu to be able to play, a 3-4 type of set and using what they, I believe, call dog now, that blitzing linebacker, just all of them. I talked with Patrick Jenkins as well, who had that, ultimately what a game, I guess you could say game-winning safety, game-winning touchdown, what have you. But just the fact that he just spoke about it like it was another day in the park will just continue to and never stop shocking me. But just hearing how they all talk about how impressed they are by these new defensive fronts, by this new situation. That's also something that the offense isn't used to. But you also see, and I see this, I think, more in practice, just because you can get, I think, a little faster when you're in the Superdome, and they really just played a lot of 7-on-7 when we were there the other day. They have fast really tight coverage secondary players. Talking with AJ Hampton, I'm going to get to that in my next segment, so I don't go over this, but he's spent time playing press coverage, and Cam Pettislow, he is the one that I think is really looking at that nickelback role, and to me is just an immediate upgrade than what we were kind of seeing in the spring. I just think you can really tell. I notice how well he scrapes when he's defending the run and really follows the ball carrier. They're able to hand off motion plays well, and talking about the Saints, and how Marcus May had a really good preseason game, I thought. And the fact that Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May, I think, played something like 4 games together that season. And Paulson Adebo, Marshawn Lattimore, the same thing. And then you hear Bradley Roby talking about how it really took him a year to get the system down for New Orleans. Now, granted, the NFL is a lot more difficult, obviously, and complex, but I do recall talking to Nick Anderson in the locker room after one of the OTA practices earlier this offseason, and he said that he felt like the Tulane had really prepared him well for the Saints playbook and that he felt like he had it down already. So that's not lost on me at all. But the secondary players that they have, Darius Swanson, I keep pointing out the size that he has, and just the creativity that they've really been able to get out there. I'm trying to look again. Yeah, they had Bailey Despaney and Darius Swanson at those safety roles. And I just think when you have guys that have that requisite size and want to be tacklers and want to stop the run, that's something that has always been one of my favorite parts about Lance Robinson's game, is just how much he wants to come downhill and stop the run. But then you have guys like Jarius Monroe who have the size to play press coverage. And so really emphasizing those takeaways this year, for a lot of the time, I think defense wins in scrimmages. And I think that was kind of the case, although there were some impressive touchdowns, including one by Garrett Mamhat, who was our scout team quarterback, and the guys loved him. They talked about him like he was Brock Purdy last year. He is pretty nifty at wide receiver and had a touchdown in the scrimmage. So you saw a little bit of promise, but I just remember every single season, the defense winning it out. But this year, it really felt like they won it out because of the caliber of guys on that side of the ball. And when you think about the fact that the entire middle of the field, defensively speaking, is being replaced by new guys and guys that weren't starters last year, to me, that's way more a net positive than anything else. I just want to add, for my scrimmage talk and just thinking again about practice before moving on to media day, how nice it is to have a kicker like Valentino Ambrosio. When I was at Tulane, or it might have been right after I left, because to be honest with you guys, my concussion, I remember things, but the timeline is never really correct. I thought I was still at school when Willie Fritz started coaching, and that was the year after that. But Cairo Santos was either there when I was there. I'm just going to stop rambling now. So I remember what it was like to really have that kind of credible kicker, but you just felt so still and so sure about him last year. And I want to say that he hit more than a 50-yarder in the Superdome the other day, and it looked like it would have been good for more. I believe that his season best is 47. I could be getting that wrong, but it just makes such a massive difference to me to have that surety at kicker. And just, again, watching the special teams drills and the art of long snapping I brought up from Greg McMahon, it's just been such a pleasure to watch. But media day, I'm going to get to that now. I remember media day in the 2021 season, and, there was not that many people there. Let's just be honest. That was prior to the 2-10 season. And I get it, just because, Tulane really hadn't demanded that attention in a while. And I really appreciated it, at least because I really got some time to know guys like Nick Anderson and Michael Pratt. I was hosting the Sports Hangover with Gus Kattengale and Jordan Kleber at the time, in one of those breakout rooms in the Glazer Club, and they had come over, and just being able to kind of ask them questions and get to know them was really helpful for me. We didn't have one last year, and I don't want to say this really, but, based on the season prior, I don't know how that really would have gone in terms of a turnout. But now we have a 12-2 team, one that was ranked 24th in the AP preseason poll, and credit to Isaac Popper on Twitter for this. For the first time since 1949. Coach Fritz made a joke about Graf being in 5th or 6th grade the last time that Tulane was ranked at Media Day yesterday. And sorry, Graf, he's definitely not that old, but I did this math yesterday. I believe that's 74 years. Cotton Bowl, biggest bowl game in 83 or 84 years. And then, 74 years since they've been ranked in the preseason poll. And I will say, yesterday was really the first time that Willie Fritz kind of acknowledged that. And I feel like the team is just comfortable with the success now. And not to say that they're cocky or that, they're expecting that, but that it's just astonishing to me that they went from literally manifesting destiny in belief in each other and this brotherhood and this idea that they set this conference championship goal for themselves. They set that goal and they accomplished it. So yeah, hell yeah, they should be able to, be able to talk about and handle the success while not taking their eyes off the prize. And that just kind of was a big change to me yesterday, because it's a huge deal for Tulane. I mean, Tulane is a relevant school. They are the only G5 school that has been ranked in whatever the other preseason poll was, and now this one. And that's crazy when you think about what the perception of this program was going into last season. And it's just credit to these guys. But I was really glad that we had a media day this year, and we had an incredible local turnout. I think all 4 major news stations were there, including, multiple people from those stations, local beat writers. It was a really good turnout. The Associated Press with Brett Martell, just really, a full, legitimate set of media people. And that to me is really big for Tulane. And then I can talk to these guys after practice, but everyone's so busy with class and training camp and meetings and, paying attention to this upcoming season. I know Willie Fritz said that next week, I think they're going to really start installing for South Alabama. So I just kind of took the opportunity to go around and talk to some guys that, are either new or were just kind of, guys that I wanted to chat with. So I think in total, I talked with AJ Hampton, who is a transfer defensive back over from Northwestern. I talked to Dante Fleming, one of the transfer wide receivers, Sincere Haynesworth, Patrick Jenkins, the guy who made the safety, Casey Glover, returning kicker, punter, and Tyler Grubbs, new transfer linebacker. I believe that I got everyone there, and I'm sorry if my brain is blanking on someone that I'm leaving out. But I started with AJ Hampton, and this is what really excited me. He comes over from the Big Ten in Northwestern, and he was all something, all pro. I should have looked this up beforehand, but alas, he played a lot of press coverage over there. And just speaking with him and, asking if he spent time in the slot, that he has. He's played a little bit of inside. They did play quite a bit of cover 4 there. So just understanding, where his leverage was, whether he was to the field or the boundary side, and just spending time at that slot role, that really stuck out to me, and how much he really loves that one-on-one press coverage. That's something that I think can be really exciting for Tulane fans to look forward to this year. Just, in contrast from the zone defense that, again, it worked very well last season, but you have an entirely new group of personnel now. And I think that you have guys that are kind of born for this, in guys like AJ Hampton, who, he is, one of the guys on the depth chart at this point. And just speaking with him and just, again, his understanding of the game. And he credited a lot of that to Jarius Monroe and Lance Robinson, and the fact that they really take the time to break down route trees with him and understanding that leverage. And just, talking how he loves the fact that he can rely on his hips, rely on his footwork, rely on his ability, and be on that island. That's something that he lives for. And that's one of his favorite things about playing cornerback. It's one of the reasons I love the role of cornerback so much too. Again, I've said the secondary is my bread and butter. It's my favorite thing to analyze on the field. And so just hearing guys, really just talk about the beauty of being able to shut down guys at the line of scrimmage, that's really exciting for me. And you see, again, just really tight coverage in these scrimmages, a lot, and 7-on-7, 11-on-11, a lot of pass breakups. And that to me is just a credit to the defensive coordinator and Sheil Wood, who AJ Hampton has pointed out as, being a defensive genius. They brought in an anchors coach. I believe his name is Rob Green. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. JJ McCleskey, who I can't say enough good things about. He's been around for so long. Again, he spent time on the Saints with the Dome Patrol, and I talked to him, and because he spent time playing with Sam Mills and how much Nick Anderson reminded him of that. All of that to say, all of these guys were just kept pointing to the coaching staff and the culture. That to me, it made me kind of beam, like, for lack of a better term, a proud mother, as I just remember these guys last year, and that quote from Nick Anderson, and talking about the 1998 guys, telling them that it's not just about hanging a banner, it's about leaving a legacy and leaving a timeline, and that's not done yet. And the fact that, AJ Hampton really picked that up and said, I'm looking away just so I can read what he said to me. That culture was the reason that he came here. He stayed with Jarius Monroe, and just the way of how welcoming he was, and just how jovial of a person he is. If anyone knows Jarius Monroe, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But saying that he can just truly see the difference here of how guys really want to win, the standard they set, the legacy that they're building, and that it's not done yet, and that he can see why guys come here for the coaching. To hear these comments about Tulane is crazy as an alumni. As a sideline reporter, I get it more. But as someone that spent time at the school when these were just not comments that were being made, it's just so crazy to me. And you heard similar comments from Tyler Grubbs as well. I brought up when I was talking with him how after the spring game, I'll never forget, someone asked him kind of why he decided to transfer over here. And he said that he wanted to come play for a winner and somewhere where they're contending for a championship. And I turn around to Steve Barrios, our color guy, and I'm like, Steve, in the 40 years that you have spent in this broadcast booth, have you ever heard someone say that about Tulane? And we started laughing when I was talking with him about it yesterday, but I just want to read his quote again, and then I will stop kind of reading off of a teleprompter here. But I just want these words to really resonate with Tulane fans, that these are coming from guys that are new to this program at that, and that they're able to really pick up what guys like Nick Anderson, Dorian Williams, Tajay, all of them talked about building, Michael Pratt and Sierra Hainsworth, all of these guys that are still here. But, he said, basically, when I asked him why he came here, he didn't have that much time left in eligibility. And he just wanted to go somewhere because they're going to keep winning, that there's something in the program that's making them win. And he wanted to be a part of that, something that's continuing and on their way to winning. He doesn't just want to come here because they won a championship. He said he wants to feel what the culture is that's going to keep a team winning. And that's why he came here. And that's why he feels like he wants to win desperately. He feels like the culture that they established here and everything that's going on here is just what's on track to keep on winning. And that's what drove him to Tulane. I mean, again, it's just crazy stuff. I asked him too about the pressure of stepping into shoes of guys like Nick Anderson and Dorian Williams. And he answered that really well too, where obviously there's just kind of, pressure to come in and do well and make a mark at a new school, and just athletes having that inherent competitive drive, but that, obviously he wants to be better than them, but it's not about replacing them. It's really, again, just building what this program is trying to do, the legacy they're trying to build, and being a part of that. It really just blew me away. But what really stuck out to me, and this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, was that he brought up, I thought I was asking, a question where I asked him what it's kind of like having your defensive coordinator as your linebacker coach, thinking that that's not necessarily always the norm. It turns out that he's had 3 years where his defensive coordinator has also been his position group coach. But what he said his favorite part about that is because Coach Wood is so knowledgeable about everything that's going on the field. He said he can ask him any question that he has about anything. Why am I doing this? Why is the D-line going this way? This is what the safety's doing. This is how they're coming down. This is how the corners are playing in this coverage. So the fact that he has all of that and that they're able to ask these questions, and that, these are entirely new guys to this program. Shiel Wood is the new defensive coordinator. Tyler Grubbs is a new linebacker. They have no prior relationship. And so just to hear that, and I remember Willie Fritz saying earlier this offseason that what stuck out to him in his interview with Shiel Wood was how nuanced and how knowledgeable he was about the first, second, and third levels of the defense, and the way that he was just able to switch from one to the other and talking about fundamentals, technique, prototype, personnel traits. And so the fact where he was kind of like, all right, let's just kind of focus on one, that is so impressive to me. And so the big voids at safety, I think that they have brought in so many good transfers in Cam Pettisclo, Tahira Noor, Darius Swanson. They have Bailey Despaney. They have DJ Douglas. Kevin Adams, I believe is his name. I'm so sorry if I got that wrong, but Corey looked it up when we were in the Superdome, so I'm blaming him if this is incorrect. He looked really good in playing at safety too, so I'm really confident about that role. And I think what you're going to see is Corey Platt and Jesus Machado. But when you think about not only the playing void, but the emotional void that those two guys leave in Dorian Williams and Nick Anderson. Those guys feel that weight, I think, and it's not lost on them. And they really want to step up into that role. But also the fact is those guys played, except the Kansas State series where they briefly went out with, heat exhaustion and had to get IVs in the locker room. Not necessarily that serious of heat exhaustion, but they played pretty much every defensive snap and played most of the time when I was there my first season as well. And as I've said, we're either the co-leading, first leading, or second leading tacklers in almost every game, including multiple times in the 2021 season. So that's a huge void that can't be understated. I think a lot of that slack is going to be picked up on the defensive line. I think that this is the deepest and most, prowess group of D linemen that I've seen at Tulane. And the fact that they are kind of bringing in that blitzing linebacker and just kind of switching it up. You saw Michael Lunds there a little bit too. I think he's a freshman linebacker and surprisingly big at that, having that size at that age. But I think the fact that the defensive coordinator is the position group coach for what is probably one of the bigger voids on the defense to me, that's really going to be an underrated but critical aspect to why I think the defense is really going to be able to repeat what they were able to do last season. The last thing I want to touch on is the offense, just because, again, the defense is my bread and butter, and I'm a defender at heart, playing soccer. So that's really always what I'm going to focus on. I just want to do a quick breakdown of the offense just before we wrap up. And again, just touch on a few more things that I learned yesterday. Just first and foremost, the fact that Michael Pratt is the quarterback that he is should inspire so much confidence in Tulane fans, running back battle aside. And I know the fact that, again, they are still going to kind of rely on that 50-50 run pass philosophy, as they should. I am a firm believer in establishing the run being an incremental part of the passing game, and we're going to see that this year. But you've seen Michael Pratt be clutch more than one time at this point. You saw it in Oklahoma. You saw it right off the bat. You saw it when he came in halfway through the game with Southern Miss. I mean, that guy is just a fighter. And the Cotton Bowl drive to me, but really the Cincinnati drive and the way that he played in the championship, and the fact that he had, I believe, 10 pass attempts up until that final drive and was able to pull off what he did, that to me is just enough. And how much every guy just points to how big of a leader he is. And I don't want to speak for him on this, but just the amount that this kid has gone through in his life, the recent passing of his brother just right before the season. And I would really encourage everyone. He has a 7-week-old daughter, I believe his brother did. Michael has posted the GoFundMe on his Instagram page. And if you have anything to spare, I can't say enough about how tragic that is. But the fact that Michael is still here showing up every single day, he's just gone through so many tragedies in this life that just don't make sense. I talked a little bit about this with Bert Kirchhoffer on my last episode, where, I'm not religious. I know that she is, and, it is kind of hard to wonder why he's been tested this much. But the fact is that he is just one of the biggest fighters I've ever seen. And he's back. He's back with the center. He's back with 4 of the 5 of the starting O linemen. And to get to the other parts of the offense and to get off that heavy topic, you have Alex Bauman coming back at tight end 1, and you had Reggie Brown in with the first team. And to me, I think that it does not go unnoticed that they have picked up a lot from the departing tight ends and Will Wallace and Tyreek James and their blocking ability. Slade Nagel, he originally was the tight ends coach when I came to Tulane. Now he's the offensive coordinator, not to mention that this is really the first continuity that Michael Pratt has ever had. He's had a different offensive coordinator every year of his career since starting playing football as a freshman in high school, which is still wild. But Slade Nagel was the coordinator last year and is continuing that this year. But knowing that he originally started with that group, that to me is something that you're never going to see the emphasis be taken off of. But that pass blocking is just super important. The run blocking that Will Wallace and Tyreek James offered. But I'm really excited about Alex Bauman. I learned this after the Cotton Bowl, and they've kind of talked about it more now. And I remember sitting with him and Valentino Ambrosio at the basketball game where they got honored with the Cotton Bowl trophy, and asking him about this. And, he was a defensive end as well as a tight end in high school. A lot of guys, when they're athletic, and I think it was Slade Nagel that said this, or it was Willie Fritz, I can't remember, but in their comments, and I agree with them, that, players should be playing offense and defense if they have that athletic ability, just because you really never know where you're going to end up. I mean, think about all of the defensive backs. Again, I talk about this with my Saints stuff all the time. Alante Taylor and Paulson Adebo were both former wide receivers, and that switch makes a lot of sense. AJ Hampton also told me that he spent time at quarterback and wide receiver at high school because he was just one of the more athletic guys on the field. But if you're playing defensive end, and I asked him, and he kind of said that he preferred playing defense to a certain point, probably doesn't feel that same way after the Cotton Bowl, but knowing that he has that drive in him, they're just kind of this aggressive nature that you have to have on defense. And so for him to just be able to pick up the time and the knowledge, and Nagel had alluded to the fact that he was battling some injuries early last year. So that also puts a ton in perspective, especially when you consider how much of a elevated role he had to take on in that Southern Miss loss last year, where Tyreek James and Will Wallace were both out. If he was nursing any type of injury or coming back early, it just puts everything in a completely different light for me. So again, maybe Alex Bauman added him, and I'm inclined to say that he did the entire time, and we're really going to see that come out in spades this year. So I'm really excited for that. But the biggest difference to me is the personnel at wide receiver and the emphasis on speed. Last year they had Deuce Watson, Shea White. Now, those are pretty big-bodied guys who could bully their way. Deuce Watts just looked like Randy Moss half the time. He should have more passes on his stat sheet. Me and Corey Galore will die on this hill that several of his incompletions last year, blasphemy. But his one-handed catch over a defensive back's head, I want to say in the Memphis homecoming game, Shea Wyatt, you just saw him stiff arm guys to the ground. Go back to that championship game. He should not have had so many breakaways that he had, but you really change now to guys that have speed in Lawrence Keys, Jaquan Jackson, and, kind of battling that wide receiver 3 role. Dante Fleming, Keith Brown, 2 transfers over. Chris Brazzell, who is, I believe, 6'4". I think he's the tallest wide receiver, and he's put on considerable weight this year, which is was kind of necessary for him. I believe he's around 195 now. And Hunter Summers is a pretty impressive freshman wide receiver as well, but the Cotton Bowl, I think it was 96 yards or 94, touchdown by Jaquan Jackson. And you have Lawrence Keys downhill blocking, stiff arming that defensive player the entire way in stride with him without even missing a beat. And, they're running around in circles afterwards, and they play so much time together on special teams as well. And so just having that chemistry, but it just stands out how quick they get downfield. And it's the same with Keith Brown and Dante Fleming. So I think that's going to be a really great balance with this run game, where if you get a little bit of a slog, knowing that these guys have the ability to send 4 verts down the field, have an empty formation. We've seen a lot of them have a play where they, split the running back out wide. And that's something to me that Tajay had such an important part in the passing game last year. So it's really good to see them working on that still. And one last thing I wanted to touch on too is what I heard from Dante Fleming, about his comments about Richard Sherman, who's the now new wide receivers coach, and the fact that he's from Laplace and he actually played high school football with Lawrence Keys and Jaquan Jackson quite a bit. So that chemistry has been building for a long time. He also told me that Tulane was his first choice coming out of high school. He didn't get offered there, but that was why he, immediately wanted to come here in the transfer portal. And I'm just such a firm believer in that you end up where you're meant to end up. I brought up, the story of Nick Anderson and how he didn't get any offers for D1 schools out of high school, and he chose to bet on himself, and look where he ended up. So I really enjoyed hearing that insight from him, but also just hearing him talk about Richard Sherman, and that he can ask him any question that he wants on the field, but also off the field. And I told him that was something that Tajay Spears had talked about, because he was the running back coach last year, that he always felt like he was a brother for him, and he really helped him get through a lot of his mental humps that he was kind of hung up on at the beginning of last year. And so to hear new guys again come in and talk about how comfortable they are with the coaching staff, but it's just, just seeing these guys, their game speed, their practice speed at that. And the fact that this new turf just does not go unnoticed on that. So you start out and you have 2 back-to-back home games on a playing field that is elite at this point, with elite speed at wide receiver. You have really good guys at tight end at Alex Bauman, Reggie Brown, and Chris Carter, one of the transfers from USF as well. You have 4 of your 5 starting O-linemen back. You have your center returning. You have them being coached by Darren Rochar. And Carter Sheridan, I believe, is the running backs coach, and he has a really great background that is totally losing me right now, but I will get that insight. And again, Slade Nagel, the continuity at offensive coordinator, and a real legitimate college quarterback, no G5 program, whatever aside, Michael Pratt is the real deal. And I'm just really looking forward to that kickoff against South Alabama, which honestly, guys, I would be looking at your tickets, because Ole Miss is now sold out 2 single game tickets. So I'm just so proud of Green Wave Nation. I don't know really what to call ourselves, so we should probably come up with something better than that. Or that's what it is, and it's fine. But you all rock. To go from last year where Tajay is saying, it was looking out of the bunker suite in one of his media interviews into the stadium and just saying it would be so cool to score a touchdown and look up and see the fans filled the stadium cheering for me. And like my heart hurt, because I'm just like, these guys deserve a packed stadium. And to your guys' credit, they got that in that Memphis homecoming game. But just for this to be happening at this speed and before the season has even started, these last 3 seasons, nothing is ever going to replace this for me in my career. So that all being said, y'all, get your tickets for the South Alabama opener. Again, that is Saturday, September 2nd. I believe kickoff is at 7:00 p.m. Dear God, this is a lesson in just double checking these things beforehand. But I'm very positive that's the case, because again, that is why we're having night practice tonight, to get used to those stadium lights. and it's going to be cool. I just, I have the jitters. I have the preseason excitement, and being able to envision a packed opening night stadium at Yeoman and knowing that that's going to happen. I'm just kind of geeking out a little bit. And again, next week is when Coach Fritz said that they're going to start kind of installing for that South Alabama game. Not going to give away any trade secrets, but I will continue to update you guys on my insights on how training camp is going in those position group battles. Absolutely. In Friday's episode this week, I'm going to focus on the Saints, get to that preseason game, because there was a lot that I liked and a lot that I had questions about. Alas, is usually the novel of preseason talk. But again, the media day was just so awesome. Again, to see the turnout and to just, again, hear the character of these guys in their comments, and just, being so comfortable to really just walk up to any of them. Just as a personal growth, this job has really changed me as a person. I've said this in my intro, but I am a very introverted only child. And a lot of people just literally don't believe me when I say this. And I am here to tell you it is 100% correct. I love nothing more than my alone time. And so all that to be said, I talked with my cousin about this, and just talking with how she's noticed a change in my personality. And this job has really brought a lot out of me that I didn't know I had. I remember feeling a little tepid and a little timid my first off season, especially, again, the fact that the team wasn't doing that great. And then I had about 2 weeks to get to know them before we all got displaced in Birmingham, which was a weird, bonding in a traumatic fashion, but not really the same type of thing. But this year, I just really felt like, in my element, for lack of a better term, and being able to talk to 6 guys in just a short period of time and learn the amount of insight that I did, which is also just a credit to these guys. I'm just really grateful to be here and keep growing in this role and continuing to provide you guys with as in-depth Tulane coverage as I can offer. So with that, I will be back on Before the Whistle this Friday.